Federal health officials say we could start seeing vaccine distributions in a matter of days. But what does that mean for us here in Alabama? Our Kanisha Dees has the latest.
Leaders with Operation Warp Speed say that if all goes according to plan, states would receive the first shipment of the vaccines for 20 million Americans this month.
Should we receive an allocation in December, which we have been told that we will be a little over 40,000 doses.
Dr. Karen Landers with the Alabama Department of Public Health says this is the number of doses once the FDA approves the vaccines. Landers says Pfizer is expected to be the vaccine we receive first.
FDA has now scheduled a meeting of its Vaccine Advisory Committee to review the Moderna vaccine on December 17th, following their meeting on the Pfizer vaccine on December the 10th.
Operation Warp Speed Chief Operating Officer General Gus Perna says the state should have their plans ready by the end of this week to receive the Pfizer vaccine and by the 11th to receive the Moderna vaccine.
So half of the allocation will be sent out, and then 21 days later for Pfizer and 28 days later for Moderna, we send out the second half of allocations.
Another vaccine, AstraZeneca, is in the works. Regardless of the brand of vaccines Alabama will receive, Landers says the health department will rely on clinic providers and pharmacies for help.
And that is recruiting providers into our imprint system and our system to be able to enroll, to order, to store, and to administer vaccine.
It would be very important, by the way, for all Americans who get the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine to have their first vaccine dose and then come back either 3 or 4 weeks later to get their second vaccine dose.
Landers says the health department has a system set up to notify individuals who received the first dose.
Part of that will be the recall through our imprint system, which is an electronic registry that we actually have had in place for a number of years.
Putting the Valley first, Kanisha Dees, WZDX News.